Today we're joined by Baldwin.
You work with the likes of Sydney Roosters, Carlton, Anthony Joshua, Red Bull. What do you do for them and why do they call you?
Predominantly it's around high performance. If there was a prerequisite for high performance in the real top level, it's hunger, deep hunger.
Is there any traits that you see in these incredible people that you work with where you're like, they all have these 2 or 3 traits?
When it gets hard, they lean in, learning from setbacks, not avoiding difficult moments. That's one thing. 2 is, if we think about hormones and chemicals, there's 4 big players and daylight triggers them. 10 minutes of daylight before 10 a.m., that's going to trigger these neurochemicals to go, whoop. You'll feel good, more focused, you're on. Pressure is a privilege because it puts an amount of stress on you that you start to understand more about yourself. What a privilege to learn about yourself based on something external that you're trying to achieve.
What would you recommend for someone that might just be starting out in business or wants to level up their life?
So,
welcome back to another episode of the Two Blokes, One Business podcast. Today we're joined by a very, very impressive man, Baldwin.
So Nam, you work with the likes of Sydney Roosters, Carlton, Anthony Joshua, Red Bull. What do you do for them and why do they call you?
Predominantly it's around high performance. What is that exactly? Well, it's the ability to really perform well when it really matters. So we could talk about pressure a little bit later on. And people like Anthony Joshua, obviously, there's an enormous amount of pressure. His last fight, unfortunately, he lost, but he had to walk past 100,000 people to get to the ring, and that in itself is enormous. You got 100,000 people chanting your name, so to speak, in the load.
Yeah.
So he calls me and people like Carlton, the team, AFL team, and the Roosters, to just help take the edge off that intensity when it really matters, so that they can think better. And that there's a whole reasoning behind that is that's what we do the most, thinking out of any behavior. Thinking is a behavior. So I want to help them improve the way they think in spite of heart rate being through the roof, or if it's an executive being under enormous deadline pressure, I want to really get in there and help that capability.
It absolutely fascinates me, people that go out there and do the business in front of 100,000 people. Like with mine and Ads' background, we were lucky to do it maybe in front of, I think 3,000 or 4,000 was the most. And I remember, heart rate's going, you've got the jitters.
Yeah.
The people that do it in front of that amount, is there an art to it? Or do you feel like they're also just naturally conditioned to cope with that pressure? And that's why they're at the top?
There is, there's a tendency for some people to really enjoy the experience of pressure and stress. For some, you got the adrenaline junkies. So some of the other people I work with do, they surf 80, 90 foot waves, they free dive, 150 meters. And it's all about the feel and the experience within that moment. So there is that tendency for some personalities to really like that. But the capability of owning the moment and being very present with that enormity, whatever it may be, is a skill that you can get good at if you put the deliberate practice in. But you've got to have a deep hunger to want to really be better. Because when it comes to pressure, there's obviously the way the brain functions. And when we get really stressed out, some of them that need to think better, that part of the brain has now taken over. So they can't think well. And so that's generally where mistakes happen, is that the emotional areas start to kick in and become overwhelming and overbearing. So the split decisions are slightly slower or not on point. And that's where mistakes can happen. So you can learn things, but you've also got to have this tendency to want it. So if there was a prerequisite for high performance in the real top level, it's hunger, like deep hunger.
So you, as much as the ones I've just mentioned at the start, super impressive, there's more Australian Olympians, there's Mick Fanning, the list goes on and on and on. All elite level athletes and sports people, do they all have the same challenges? Do they all come to you for the same reasons, or does the sport dictate what they need from you and it will varies person to person?
Yeah, everyone has their unique challenges. They might be a similar from a principles perspective. As an example, someone might come in and go, look, I get very anxious when I compete, which is quite normal, but then there's the tools that we need to unpack and discuss to support them leveraging anxiety that is very personalized And a lot of it comes from, I think the reason why I've had such great variety and success is asking the right questions and not telling. So when you really want someone to perform well, the best thing you can do is actually let them do what they do best and but ask the right questions so that then they tell themselves the truth of what will help them perform very well, because top performers generally know what they're doing. It's just that they get, stuck on a result, so they're in the future rather than on their process. And the simple things that we can unpack today for the end user, the people that are listening, is that whatever you do, there is some very powerful principles if you apply. You can really change your game and you can play a bigger game in what you're doing and really enjoy the process.
I love that. And just picking up on what you said around they know exactly what they're doing. When they come to you, is it often, okay, Anthony Joshua is going to come and seek the sort of support that you give him off his own back? Or is it a coach saying, hey, we need to go and work with someone like Nam? Or is it a mix of both?
It's a mix of both. And AJ Anthony and his coach, one of his strength and conditioning coaches, I think they had a deep discussion around, okay, who can we bring in that can support not just the physical aspect, but the mental too? And it was just by chance that a good friend of mine was working in Loughborough in England.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he was at the Loughborough track, Loughborough Uni track, which I ran at actually as a kid.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
Yeah, wow.
I was a 400 meter runner. Anyway, he bumped into AJ and Ben, his coach, at the time, and they were doing something, and he was like, wow, they're doing that wrong. And he just couldn't help himself. He went up and he said, look, can I give you a bit of a hand with what you're doing there? This is not, I don't know why you're doing that. And then they had this deep discussion. It was just, they were getting him to do some breath work whilst he was doing some drills. And it was just, I don't know exact detail, but it was one of those things where Phil Clayton is the guy. Phil Clayton's an amazing life-saving champion of his day, and he's a swim coach. I taught him a lot of stuff, and he was over there going, Nam would be like, what the hell? So he had to intervene, and he had a chat, and he said, look, try this and this. And they go, wow, where do you get that from? He goes, oh, there's this guy in Australia. And so that was the link, and they both went, we need to get in touch with that guy. And that's how it unfolded.
When you work with these super impressive people that are so focused on that one goal or outcome, especially if it's someone that a coach has said, hey, we need to go and work with someone like Nam, do you find an initial resistance from the athlete?
Sometimes, and I always question the person that got me in. If it's not the actual person, I go, look, I'm very happy to support you, but I need to know whether they want to do this too.
Yeah.
If not, and you think it's no, we have to have this happen, then speak to them and go, I would like to have a brief conversation about how I can support them so that they get clarity that this could be useful. And I can give you an example of an athlete that stood me up and stuff if you'd like.
Yeah.
So there's so I work with sailors too. And there's he's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist now, where his name's Matt Wern. He's a wonderful human. I flew to, he trains a lot. We did train a lot in Perth, and I flew over to Perth because his coach at the time was really trying to get him to the next level. I think he was 22 in the world or something, and doing pretty good, right up there in Australia, but kind of just missing the mark a lot. And he was one of those guys that he's quite a straighty 180 and, lived by the way that he should do things in sailing, and anything outside of sailing, what's that going to help me for, So anyway, Belinda, the coach, amazing coach as well, she's Olympic gold medalist, she rang me and said, look, you've got to come and chat to this guy, Matt. He needs your help, because she knew me very well and what I do. And I'm like, okay, does he want me to come? And she goes, I don't care. You're coming over. I'm like, all right, but please just check. And I don't think she did. So I flew over. I did have another squad I was working with, so it wasn't all wasted. And anyway, I had to meet him at a coffee shop. So I went to the coffee shop, waited, and he didn't come. He stood me up. He's like, this is pointless. Who is this guy? And he thought I was, it's just going to be about breathing, which it never is.
No.
And I rang, but then I said, I've been here a couple of hours. Like, is he okay?
Yeah, you held on for a couple of hours.
Yeah. I just sat there and waited.
Yeah.
And he stood you up. And I'm like, oh, well, at least I got the other squad and all that stuff. Anyway, she said, no, you're going to catch up with him tomorrow. I'm like, are you sure? She's like, yep, that's it. So anyway, come to Western Australia Institute of Sport, meet him in there because that's his ground, you know, Wace. So he came in and he sat down and the typical sort of legs crossed, arms crossed, kind of staring at me like, what are you going to tell me? Like, really?
Yeah.
You don't sail.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah.
So the first question I asked him was, can you tell me the depth of what you really enjoy outside of sailing? And just let it land.
Yeah.
And he went, what? I said, I really need to know what is running the absolute depth of you when it comes to enjoyment and fulfillment outside of sailing. And he, well, okay. And he started, off he went. And I just dug question by question, deeper and deeper, the true essence of what he's about outside of sailing. Now, that's a really important piece because lifestyle outside of your normal role of what you do can be so supportive or destructive to your life's work. In his case at that time is sailing. And he went down these rabbit holes of, you know, I love riding a mountain bike through the streets of European villages and looking at architecture. It just rings my bell. I just love the differences of how Australian Europe, and he went on and on. I'm like, cool. So we're unpacking your values here, what you really value. And I just kept going deeper and deeper. And within an hour or two, it was probably 2 hours, I then went, so how do you think I can help you? And he's now on. He's just literally told me his entire life's purpose outside of sailing. And he goes, I get really nervous when the pressure's on. I go, we're in the right place. And then I just gently started to unpack with him what he goes through, the science behind it, the tools that can assist him, and what, based on what he just said, what I believe would work incredibly well. And here's the thing. When we go and unpack these tools, I guarantee that you're going to have an enormous amount of fun because I'm going to make it so playful, like you just spoke about, that you just want to lap it up. And he almost fell off the front of his chair because he was so intrigued.
Wow. You're like, I've got him here.
Yeah.
I've got him.
And then from then, it was the most amazing relationship where gave him a whole heap of tools. Straight away, he's just rocketing up through winning and getting to now the stage where Tokyo was coming and we needed him to be the best in Australia. He needed to win. And there was another guy that was the best for some time. He'd won a gold medal before and only one sailor goes to the Olympics, obviously, from Australia. So you get one ticket. And they had a series of events and he had to do incredibly well in most of them. And about the third one in, I think it was out of 5 before the board came together and chose who goes, he completely stuffed up. And I was on holiday in the Maldives at the time, having an amazing surf trip. And I remember one night I got this text going, I need you. And so I got up, rang him, what's going on? He goes, I fell apart. The pressure got to me. I'm like, it's okay. You're human. It happens. Let's work back on your process again. Tell me about your process. What works again? Remind me, refresh my memory. And off he went. And as he's talking about what works for him, his confidence started to come back. And he's like, you know what? I think I can do this next event. If I win this next event, I'm back in the running. If I win the one after that, I'm first. And off we went down that track. 2 to 3 days of conversations whilst I was in the Maldives, he's in Europe. He had the event, he won, which was incredible to come back from such a disastrous thing. Anyway, there was that journey continued because then he obviously got the ticket, which was incredible. It got given to him. But then he had to go through another couple of events and he messed up on one terribly and then won another one. So the lead into Tokyo was a mess. It was like, wow, okay, it's okay. This is normal. People make mistakes. We get to Tokyo, 5-day event, right? 5 days of competing, 37 other sailors. Each day you got to figure out wind change direction. You got to figure out where you are in the field of where you need to get to today to make sure that you might get on the podium tomorrow, as an example. So first day, part of his sail snaps, stone last.
You're like, I'm about to get a phone call.
Yeah. Literally get the phone call. I'm like, yeah, but we know that, these things can happen. It's an uncontrollable. What can we control? Back to process again. And some of his processes were so intricately detailed that if he nailed them, the outcomes from that would be significant. Next day, wrestled back a little bit. So conversation, and then we really drilled down, and with his coach, Blokes at the time, we really kind of connected. Matt, okay, don't forget, and focused entirely on process. Let's let go of the result. Just let it go. We know what you want. And he just dialed in on process so well, because that's how sailors operate. It's all about detail. Success is in the detail. And then clarity around where his mind is allowed to go. So when it comes to pressure, it's a matter of where your attention is. And at any given point, when pressure hits a certain point, your attention can get grabbed by a story in your head. Having a very clear mindset, we can unpack that in a sec, really helps you direct your attention to what's important, not what emotions are trying to grab and tell you. And we worked on that for 2 years. Anyway, end of the 5th day, even if he came second last, he'd win the gold.
Oh.
And he won the gold. He actually won the event that last day.
Yeah.
So he won the gold. Yeah. Then the important thing is, okay, cool, well done. Then he got long COVID and fell into a bit of depression and worked his way through that, through really good protocols. And then he won in Paris again. And that was all, again, based on the stuff we did and he did with his coaches before Tokyo. So it wasn't just me. I was a part of it, but we were all part of it. And yeah, back-to-back gold from a guy that stood me up.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
That's an incredible story. In terms of the process, it's going to be unique to the person for what they need, but is there some principles of what the right preparation and process looks like?
Yeah, the most important thing is it's got to be very simple, and it's almost sometimes too simple. A bit like today, here we are, your process is send me some ideas of what you're going to ask me, and then I can sort of think about that. And that's just part of the process. That's very simple. For an athlete, it's around, one thing in particular is you need to be in the right state as best as you can for what you're about to do. How you show up to training is a very important part that you're so controlled by the person. You don't have to feel good to do good. You don't. But it definitely supports if you do. So part of the process is simply make sure your warm-up really warms up your body and the way your brain functions. And that's where some athletes go wrong. It's like, I'll just do a couple of squats. I'll just, do a couple of planks.
Yeah.
Get my body into gear. And then I'll just have a quick look at my socials. So the body might be kind of there, not really, but the brain is definitely not there. So part of process with athletes I work with is we need to warm up both. I want you thinking so sharp as well as feeling so sharp before you go into what you do in training, almost more than you need to compared to when you compete. So that competition is just fun. I've done the work. I know I'm going to fall to the level of my training, and I've trained so well that the process will take care of outcomes.
How can we translate that into the business world? Because we operate, our business is a sales environment, and we've got staff where it can be really, really difficult out there at times. And we try and do as much work with them as possible. But I love the way that you say getting ready every day, almost like that's your morning routine, to then come in and, you know what? I'm probably going to get some no's. I'm probably going to get some doors slammed in my face, but it's game time and I love it. I think if you can adopt that mentality in business, in a sales role, you will go very, very far.
Yeah. I think one thing is, the way that you reappraise difficulty, the way you look at difficult moments and have a conversation with yourself or someone team member like you guys to go, man, I find sales difficult. Okay, let's talk about that. So that then there's a bit more clarity of the whys and what can we do from here? Where to from here? Let's work on an anticipation that out of 100 people that you call, you're going to get 95 knockbacks. So expect it, anticipate it. Now you've set your brain up to know that that's going to happen. So when it happens, it's less threatening. Then, yes, having very clear process about how you show up. So generally the state we're in drives the story in our heads, which is what we're really up against all the time, is our story, our own belief system that says, you can't do it, you're not good enough, or whatever it is, or they're going to knock you back again. You've got to learn to work with that. And that's where, say, a mindset can come in, which just grabs your attention back to what needs to be focused on based on an overarching attitude that you're bringing to the situation mindset. So when it comes to, for me, I always say that's helpful is, be aware of the day and think about it in quarters. Let's talk AFL, right? They have quarters. So the first quarter should be about you, getting in a good state, getting enough daylight in your eyes, hydrating, good nutritious breakfast, if you're into that, bit of exercise and movement, so that when you show up to make that call in your second quarter, the second quarter is about moving the needle and getting down to the work, but having process around how you will deal with the setback when it happens, because it's going to happen. And there's a little thing that you go to when you have a setback. You might jot down, A, how you're feeling. Wow, that made me feel frustrated. B, okay, where to from here? Cool. It's one of my 90% that's going to happen. Cool. That's one down. That's great. Okay, who's my next call? Or do I need to get up and move and just flush that chemistry out a bit? So you've got these little protocols that you go to that are almost ready to be used, not how am I going to think myself out of this one? So you've got to preempt a bit, which is the third quarter where you plan for the next day. So today was a challenging fight. Tomorrow, I better think about some of these setbacks I've had and how I'm going to work through it. And then you start to build this resiliency based on leaning into difficulty, not getting consumed by it, and learning from setbacks, learning from that is where you actually learn the best, not your wins. It's the difficulties that you get to learn, but you've got to learn to express them well and talk about them or write them down so that parts of the brain that need to get through that processing is sped up. Otherwise, you could get a year down your career and go, this isn't for me. Like, whoa, if only we worked on that the first week.
Yeah.
What's the fourth quarter?
Fourth quarter is winding down. Fourth quarter is about you again and your relationships that you have maybe outside of work that you connect really well, because whatever you go home to, could be a partner, could be a dog, could be a cat, could be whatever it is, the better that relationship, the better the connection with that relationship, the more fulfilled you'll feel outside of work. And what is that? Well, fulfillment is that you feel that this is purposeful, what I'm doing. It's helping you have a better lifestyle, hopefully, because the work that you've done is now leading to maybe better income or, more choice in how you operate at work. So you feel this sense of purpose. But then when you get home, you want to relish in the winding down phase and connecting phase so that you're moving into the most important part around performance, which is quality sleep. If you don't wind down, sleep is not something you can go 1, 2, 3, sleep. It takes time. So you want that quarter to be connective, enjoyable, relaxing, because tomorrow, the second quarter again, it's on.
So powerful the way just to look at that day in those 4 quarters.
I love that.
And we discuss it all the time. And I think the biggest one for us is that morning routine. Since we stepped away from part-time football, we've been able to integrate a much more solid morning routine into our life. So getting up, getting to the gym, getting on a run. And I come into work like on another level compared to when we used to train late the night before and like you're slouching around in the morning. And it's just like, you just feel like you're tapping into a new game.
Yeah.
And you're just beating everyone from the offset.
Yeah. Some of my clients I work with, I have put together what's called a daily primer. And it's a series of questions to prime better thinking through the answers that they put. And the questions are not complex. One could be, who needs my A game today? How am I going to demonstrate it? And then you might think about your team and go, today I've got to connect with Harvey. I need to make sure that I've done the thing that he asked me to do and I've done the work. I know I'm ready and I can't wait to show him the things that I've produced. But I do that first before I come into work. So I'm priming myself with that type of knowledge, thinking backup, so that I'm almost excited to present things to you, which makes you go, cool, you're enthusiastic.
Look how engaged he is, yeah.
So little questions like that, there's many, but they can't take more than 10 minutes, so that you're not going to get questions. It takes me forever. You have to do them in under 10. That's it. There's no other time. You can just 10 minutes. You do it, and it forces you to the point.
Can we unpack that and go through, if someone's listening to this and it's their first step along this journey? Obviously, people like Anthony Joshua, Mick Fanning are absolutely incredible people and already so far along that journey, perhaps where you come in. But what would you recommend for someone that might just be starting out in business or wants to level up their life? What's the Nan Baldwin playbook?
So I start strong. Win your morning, start strong is an important piece. And that would mean, okay, when you wake up, understand that there is a moment as you're waking up when your brain is probably incredibly clear. Some people are like, no, it's groggy. Well, maybe get better sleep. But generally, if you've had a relatively good night's sleep, as you're waking up, that's where good ideas can suddenly drop. It's called the theta state. And we're coming out of REM sleep, and now we're coming into wakefulness. So I generally say the first thing what I do personally is I set an intention for the day. Like, who do I want to be today? And what have I got to what are a couple of things I want to focus on that I want to really nail? And I kind of think about that just for a moment as I'm coming out of being asleep. So I set this intention. Then I always go to my breath for a couple of breath cycles. Like I just breathe in for 5 seconds, out for 8, to really get my system just to be ready and calm to take on the next step. And you could do that 5 times. Mm-hmm. So you're just centering yourself. Then have a drink of water. Like simple, I know, but 600 ml of water is what's going to help flush into your brain and get your brain to kick into gear, get your bowel movement, all that kind of stuff. Simple thing to do. Then I go into, okay, now I need to move. So I've had that drink. I may have gone to the toilet, had a shower, and I need to get outside. Like get out there and go for a walk or something to get your brain into gear, your body into gear. When the blood flows, the brain flows. It's the truth. So get blood moving, get your lymphatic system moving, get into daylight so you trigger all the neurochemistry in your brain to come alive. Here in Australia on the Gold Coast, jeepers, we've got so much daylight. And it's good for our brains to experience that because there's a hormonal symphony that needs to happen for highly effective thinking and feeling. And if we think about those hormones and chemicals, there's 4 big players. Well, there's probably 6, but 4 big ones that we need to have in operation, and daylight triggers them. 10 is what I say. 10 minutes of daylight before 10 a.m. is a great thing because of the angle of the sun. You want to get the right amount of blue light in your eyes before 10 a.m. That's going to trigger these neurochemicals to go boom. You'll feel good, more focused, you're on. After 10, the angle of the sun changes, so you don't quite get the same hit. Still great. You can wear sunglasses, that's fine. Then I say, okay, so invigorate. Then think about something that you are grateful for, if you could, like appreciate something, so that negative bias that we're all born with gets stopped before it takes over. Oh, this is not right. Jeepers, I got this today. Oh, that's not fair. Da-da-da. Just sit for a second, go through a bit of a narrative of why you're grateful for something. It has to be a narrative, like a little story of why. A moment, you could jot that down. 3 things: person, something I have, and myself that I'm appreciative, grateful for. And then the last thing I do, this is all before I kind of either have a coffee or around a coffee or before I have brekkie. Okay, anticipate what is going to happen today that needs my focus, that could go wrong. How am I going to work around it? And what's going to go right? And focus and enjoy that moment. But only for a couple of minutes. I'm not getting stuck in it. I'm just kind of figuring out the path of the day and anticipating tough stuff, good stuff. So now my brain's ready to take on the tough stuff and looks forward to the good stuff. So I'm building optimism in that process. Then ideally the day before, you would have planned your top 3 things that you want to nail. There might be more. But your ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. A is the top priority, and there's maybe 3 things in that. B is next, top 3, C next. So you're just jotting down as best as you can the day before. What are those priorities? And you'd have a look at that with your anticipation phase. So now you're priming your brain and you've primed your body because you've moved for a bit of time into gear to now operate towards its best. And everyone's best is different every day. So be your best today could be that you've had 4 hours sleep because your son woke you up, your daughter woke you up, whatever. You didn't get a good coffee. You didn't move, didn't get any daylight. But see if you can do your best in spite of that. So I worked with a guy called Cooper Cronk. He's an NRL player.
Yeah.
And Cooper was going into his last season, and one of the things that was happening, he's just had a newborn, just got married, and he decided to tell the press the week before games started in his last year that he was retiring. So he's on stage in front of this massive audience of press people because he's a big name in NRL, and he's choking up a bit and he's saying, so I've decided at the end of the season, I'm done. And he went through, he's thanking people and stuff, and that was done. I was at the back of the room, and I could see, he looked at me and I could see in his eyes like, oh no. And I'm like, oh no. And he comes over and he goes, mate, I've stuffed up. I'm
boy.
like, oh, you shouldn't retire? He goes, no, I've just retired. In my head, I've just retired. And I've got a season to go. Yeah. And I'm got a newborn. I don't sleep good. My shoulder's still busted. I have a 7 centimeter crack in his shoulder blade from the season before. It's in pain all the time. Just got married. I want to support my wife as best I can. But now I'm like, Cooper, remember starting strong? He goes, oh, that win the morning shit? I'm like, yeah, that shit. We need to nail that as a process. So we did. And we got down to the nitty gritty of the most important thing was the purpose of going into the club. And his was to make sure that the players would end up having one of the best nights of their lives at the end of the season, winning the premiership. And if I show up, in spite of being tired and sore, let's just see how good I can go today. And that was his mantra in the morning. Let's just see how good I can go today, even though I've slept poorly, And he just kept that mantra going with a few other little factors that we threw in. Long story short, with following that type of process of getting in the right state with those steps, end of the season, they win the premiership. Who was the main player?
Wow.
Cooper Cronk. So it was one of those things where even that type of athlete that's finishing in pain, doesn't sleep well because he's got a newborn, all these, they're superstars. Yeah, but they have the same stuff that you and I have that really impacts them. Having a clear process at the start of the day can really support the rest of the day. You've got to figure out what fits for you. Biologically, breathing, hydration, movement, and daylight should be essential. Not lifestyle luxuries, biological necessities to tap into.
What does a really, really shit morning routine look like? Because I think it's easy to hear what a great one is and go, oh yeah, I could do that. Yeah. I do that once a week.
Yeah.
But what's a shit one?
So going to your phone, I think, is one of the worst ones because now your thinking is being governed by information that you're looking at. So it's grabbing your attention. So you're detraining focus, not just for the day, but for your life.
Mm-hmm.
You're always on something new. Then not hydrating well because it's a biological necessity. You need to get above the hydration line that your body likes to sit at as early as possible. Otherwise, you're chasing your tail. And if there's one thing to really get your brain to function poorly, it's dehydration. So that's critical, not having a drink. You could have a coffee and stimulate yourself, which is still hydration, believe it or not, even though there's a bit of a diuretic in it. It's still liquid. But it's nowhere near what it could be if you had, say, 400 to 600 mil when you first wake up. And then getting really stuck in negativity as soon as you wake up with an argument or whatever. You just got to see if you can roll through the physical aspects well, the mental, not getting grabbed by someone else's attention, and then emotional regulation so that you at least come into work neutral. You don't have to be happy. Neutral's great because it gives you choice. You come in angry, frustrated, you generally bring the rest of the team down because, Emotions are contagious.
It's so funny that because I remember when we first met you, Nam, 15 months ago, the Swiss boot camp, and you ran through the morning routine, and I followed it religiously for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4. I was out there recording videos on LinkedIn, getting my 10 minutes daylight in. And then as you've been saying that, okay, what was my routine this morning? And I'm someone who actually thinks I've got half a decent routine, but it was that. I woke up, snoozed for 10 minutes, looked at BBC Sport, read a bit of football, had a missed call and a text from a candidate I placed saying, mate, I've just been fired. So straight away, I'm going, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Drank a bit of water, fair enough, and then went to the gym. But straight away, there's probably 2 out of the 4 things which really haven't set me up to go and have a good day. And then I come into the office to Harv and I go, mate, I just feel like things are getting on top of me a bit at the moment. Just feel like, I haven't got that same gusto or the fight that I could or should normally have.
And it's a discipline too, and it's a commitment. So that's where we can talk about values. What do you really value when you come into work? What is really important to you as a leader? And when you sort of dive into that space a little bit, what you can then go to is, okay, so what are some of the recipes, the rules that I can follow that I'll commit to? Because if I do, that value comes alive. So motivation is a cup of coffee. Commitment is what you want if you want to be very successful and fulfilled. You need to commit, not be motivated. But commitment comes from some deeper work. So I'd say with what you just said, the movement and the exercise would have really supported you. So at least you got that right. And that, your biology really changes your psychology. So you would have kind of flipped up a gear or 2. It's just the other fringes that you want to work on, because habituation, how your brain functions, comes down to a lot of it through habit formation and patterns that you're flowing through and aligning with. But if you can break that pattern every so often, of course you're going to go off the rails, right? It happens all the time. But if you go, okay, I'm just going to really work on setting that intention when I first wake up. So how do I want to show up today? Because the people I'm in front pick up so quickly how I'm doing, and it does influence them through mirror neurons behind your forehead. Monkey see, monkey do. So if you show up with a bit of a other people will go, well, if the boss is I can go like that too.
Yeah.
And so it starts to breed into the culture. And culture, by the way, is potentially 8 times stronger than strategy.
It's such a powerful takeaway from that morning routine. We've just asked you how you can level up and at least take your first step to being one of these incredible people. And with the influence today of social media, AI, all the different kind of influencers online, it's so easy to lose track of that. And you've not even spoke about changing anything different in your profession, the way you work, your systems, your processes, other than a simple routine of winning the morning to unlock the next level.
Yeah. And then that's the 4 quarters. The second quarter is, let's go to work.
Yeah.
And dive in with passion. Like, find a way where you enjoy parts of the process. Obviously, this stuff is like, mate, this is not enjoyable. Well, look forward to the short break that you're going to have shortly. You're going to have your coffee break or whatever it is, or get outside and just go for a walk. Try and, really dig deep into the passion of part of your process. Why? Because to focus well, you need a neurochemical called noradrenaline. It's the derivative of adrenaline. So noradrenaline is what helps us focus and get things done. But if we keep driving that focus, okay, I got to go focus hard on this, that neurochemical can become a little too high and overwhelm sets in. The brain goes, okay, frontal lobe, which I used to think is now getting overwhelmed, too much. So what we need to do in the process too, in the morning or through that second quarter, is where are the little wins? Where are you making a tiny bit of progress, and recognize them so that the neurochemical dopamine pops up and drops noradrenaline, and now you feel more motivated. But if you didn't recognize those wins sometimes, the noradrenaline gets too high and you're just like, I'm just getting so overwhelmed. So you got to recognize little wins in part of the process too, because of that neurochemical perspective.
Can we jump back to commitment? Because I think one thing that's obviously, and we say quite a lot, we can give someone all the tools in the world, all the information, but when it comes to the bottom of it, they've just got to want to do it. How can you best stay committed through starting something like this, which for some people might be a complete flip-flop on what their current routine is?
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the show. Now, while I got your attention, apart from being professional podcasters, we also run a recruitment agency called Baldwin Consulting.
Yeah, we're super lucky that we get to partner with some of Australia's most well-known brands and biggest organisations. So if you're keen to hear a little bit more about how we add value to their teams and businesses with the right people, we'll put the links in the show notes, or you can check us out at www.baldwinconsulting.com.au. Now enjoy the rest of the show.
I always like to start with someone's values. So what you value about what you're doing, how does that really connect to some intrinsic drivers within you? You know, as an example, I love performance. I love growth. I love seeing others grow, and I love growing myself. Why? Well, for me, it's come from potential hardship when I was young, of going through some enormous challenges. But then when I broke through those challenges, I experienced what is to me growth, personal growth. Like, wow, that was so fulfilling. It was like liberating to have that shift. So that became a very strong value because of the feelings I got from the experience of growth. That meant now in the future, whenever I come up against something challenging, I go, hey, if I can work out the process behind how to get this across the line and make some progress, I'll feel growth. And I want to feel that again because it's a part of what makes me up as my identity, which is a multitude of things, but values is one. So then I go, okay, so in order to get this process and progress in what I want to do, like what you guys do, if I nut it out and I sense growth, I can then go, that's a value getting hit. And I recognize it because I've spoken about it and deliberated on it. And now I'm starting to create what we call commitment to my growth as well as, say, the business growth. Now, commitment means that if I back away and go, no, it's too hard, or I just don't want to do it, it's kind of boring, I'm missing out on what's really important to me. So what I'm saying here is it's important to figure out, okay, what are your values? And people go, oh, it's family. Okay, but let's go a bit deeper. What about the family? I can give you one if you want.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're happy to share some of those challenges that created that value of growth for you.
Yeah, so when I was a kid at cricket practice, we were living in South Africa, and you drop the ball 3 times. Unfortunately, you get beaten with the cricket bat 3 times. So it was one of those ways that back in the day, you got beaten into submission.
You'd have been decent in the field.
Yeah. So it was obviously very painful, both physically and emotionally. So I was fortunate when I went home and had amazing parents, but they couldn't do anything because it was the law. Like teachers could beat you with relative reason. They could beat you. And they just happened to be very big humans. I was living in South Africa, and there were Afrikaners that generally men at that day were quite big. 6'5", So anyway, it was hard when you're an 8-year-old to get beaten by that type of human. So going home, they just supported, loved as much as I could, and go, well, there's nothing we can do about it. You're just gonna have to kind of deal with it. Went outside, kicking stones, like, this is shit. 5 more years of this, what the hell? And then we had an amazing gardener, a guy called Joseph, who was, I think it was 5th Dan, black belt. So he'd been through some great disciplines around self-control and so on. And he said to me, no, what's wrong? And I said, I dropped the ball, got beaten 3 times. Show me your hands. And my hands were shaking still. And then he grabbed them. And he was one of these guys, when you look at him, he's like an Anthony Joshua, not quite as tall or big, but similar. Just an Adonis, like this black South African Zulu, just fit as. And I'm like, this guy's a god. And he grabbed my hands and he goes, I'm going to show you something, and you'll never drop the ball again. I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah, you've got me.
So pain changes you. So I said, okay, what do I got to do? And then he taught me how to breathe very, very well, whilst also putting me under pressure. So I learned to regulate my heartbeat, my nervous system through breath control. One thing led to another, where then he taught me martial arts. I then went back into cricket practice. I barely dropped the ball ever again. I taught my mates how to breathe, to stay calm. Our junior school won the state championship at cricket that year. So I learned how to teach too.
Yeah.
Because of what I was taught and how quickly I upskilled by being able to stay calm. At 8 years old.
Wow.
Phenomenal, yeah. But pain is an interesting driver, right? Pain really opens up or closes down potential. I just managed to get someone to really assist me, which is a big part of this journey of life, is who's your team members, because they can be so important to the puzzle. And then that basically meant that I felt growth on a very high level, not just for me, but those that were important to me, my mates, that then locked in that growth is important and helping others is important. Now that's a value. And it kept building, because I was also taught by members of the ANC, National Congress, and at the time when Dad was working with them, about values, what they are. Like the color of your skin doesn't matter. We all have red blood. So we're all human. And they really discussed it well, in the sense that if we can, really work towards a common goal, there's going to be a better outcome. And values is what's driving that, not personal, emotion, so to speak. A value is more because if we can work together, there's equality. Everyone has part of the pie, so to speak, which is good for others, good for the person, and good for the greater good. That marries up against the value. And now that starts to lock in with rules and beliefs around how to make that come alive. And for me, simple thing for growth is that part of the day I support someone. Simple thing, just support someone, send them a nice text or how you doing on that? Could just be recognizing a small win. And now I'm experiencing growth regularly because I've locked that in as a recipe, as a rule behind how I experience growth. So the deal is what's important to you, and maybe get 5 top values. So if I ask you guys, what's the most important value for the business? What is it from a hierarchical perspective?
Authenticity.
Okay, so being truthful to yourself, and then living through that by being transparent and open and not trying to be someone else. Be you, which might be confronting, and you might need to talk about something that is a bit challenging, but authenticity says that we're being who we truly are. And there's less guesswork for those around us. And the more you do it, the more you feel that authenticity that then becomes so powerful, because it creates such a nice ripple effect through the team that now you commit to it. You don't have to be motivated. It's like we need to commit to this. It works. And that commitment drives the behaviors, not motivation. It's commitment. It's not a cup of coffee.
Was there a dark side to some of those experiences that you've had as a child, in the sense of, you're obviously very lucky that you had someone that helped you get over that fear and taught you to breathe. If someone perhaps didn't have that experience, or there might have been some kind of issues that you developed off the back of that you've then had to process down at a later date, for example.
So I went to boarding school after that when I was turning 10, English boarding school, and mixed 1,500 kids. Bullying was quite rampant back then. And I remember in South Africa, the thing was that we went home every day from school, and we had amazing, adventurous parents. So on the weekends, we'd go to mountains and sleep in caves, and amazing parents. We were very fortunate. But then when we got thrown in boarding school, all that freedom got taken away. And I was so upset. I had such deep sadness as a 10-year-old, because I was stripped of the weekends doing what I wanted to do and having fun outside. It was all structured, church in the morning and prep time at this time, and then you can have a bit of free time and all that kind of stuff in the house by 6:30 in the evening, or lock. And it really hurt me. And it made me go, wow, freedom's such an important value. And I went into almost depression as a kid. I didn't know what to do. I breathed. That helped a bit. I did, like 100 push-ups every night. That really helped get rid of the chemistry. But it was dark. I was in a bad place. What then happened, though, is I leaned in with curiosity, like, how am I going to get through this? Because it was at that point where I'd ring my mum, who couldn't come and see me for 3 months, and go, you got to get me out of here. What have you done? And cry down the phone. And she's like, I can't. And I realized then, okay, so I've got another 2.5 months of this, and you're not here to save me. I got to figure it out. So I had to lean in and reach out with friends. And I remember walking back from English class one morning at I think it was a Monday morning, had a pretty average weekend of not doing what I wanted to do, locked into the curriculum. And then I remember walking back and thinking about some of the weekends I had in South Africa about being free and enjoying stuff, and just bursting into tears in front of a mate, like couldn't hold it back. The chin wobbled.
Mm.
And back then it was like, you're soft, you're weak if you cry. And I couldn't hold it any longer. I was like, oh, and I just let rip. And I remember it was one of the most moving moments I've ever, and I remember exactly to the day as I'm just heaving with tears because I was so sad. His arm came around and put it around me, and he gave me his handkerchief, right? Handkerchiefs were in those days. He gave me his handkerchief, goes, "No, it's going to be okay." And it was like bonding, boom. And I felt this such deep level of connection with a mate that then I spoke to him regularly about how sad I was and what we could do. And then we started to get into sport more. We put that pain into something. And we got really into sport, into squash at the time, into rugby. And we excelled because we had this purpose of, if we can't get out of here, we may as well put this horrible energy we got into something good, because that's all it is. And it drove us to become amazing athletes from pain. So sometimes pain just needs to be directed to something that you love, like sport. I love sport.
One thing we've spoken about previous podcasts and a lot is we had a fine upbringing. We were not from working class backgrounds. Both of us had a bit going on in our lives. We kind of use that as fuel. Now, can you become an Anthony Joshua, a Noah Baldwin, a Mick Fanning without some sort of pain?
Yeah, good.
As a
good
kid,
question.
can you have that burning motivation to not just be good, but to be great if you've always had a pretty sheltered, cozy, comfortable life?
Yes, I believe you can. You've got to get to know your purpose really well. And then team, you need people to assist. No one can do it alone. So I've discovered over the years of working with so many different people that there's this moment where you go, I want to do that. I want to be that. And capture it when it happens, because everyone has what I believe potential. You got to realize it though. It's all part of what we run as our business, is we help people realize the potential. You know you've got an enormous potential. And if you've got a skill in a certain craft and you want to go the next level, you need to reach out, within yourself. You need to go within. Don't become necessarily extraordinary, because now you're trying to probably copy someone else. Become unordinary. There's lots of ordinary people out there that kind of roll, and this is fine. But then if you want to be unordinary, you got to crack open the inner you and go, what's deep in you that wants to come out? And as that crack opens through a thought, an impulse around a chat or a coffee by yourself, and like, you know what, I want to do that. Start digging into that space. And that will open up to you being courageous, because it's scary when you say, I want to do that. And you're like, really? And then you got to work on, a team around you to support that, whatever you think is right. It will, in the end, roll out to be something either exactly what you want or something quite similar. So football players now really doing well in business. So you're still successful, but in a slightly different domain. But it was probably football that put you where you are now. And it ended up that way because of your discipline, commitment to the game, so to speak. So it's about trying to unlock the unordinary in you that becomes extraordinary. But you're not trying to copy someone. You're trying to be you, authentic.
Probably to kind of contradict that, or obviously we're trying to find our difference personally. Is there any traits that you see in these incredible people that you work with where you're like, they all have these 2 or 3 traits? That's a selfish question.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So it's not avoiding difficult moments, leaning into them. They're good at that. When it gets hard, they lean in a way that might be asking some good questions, learning from setbacks, not avoiding difficult moments that can lead to setbacks. So taking risk, but then with that, making sure that you learn something from it. That's one thing. 2 is purpose. Why? You want to do this, but what for? And get into the depths of the why, And that can come from a good conversation with someone and just going, so why that? And why that? go 5 or 6 deep, where you really drop deep into the why and just keep opening up that crack in you that says, hey, this is why. And then making sure that you've got other things outside of the thing that you really want to do to support how you're feeling as a consistent basis. So look after your health and your well-being through other means of eating good lifestyle, that kind of stuff, so that you've got your cup filling up regularly to pour into this purpose of yours. They don't drain themselves from other things. They actually fill things up. Jess Fox, they work with it, amazing at figuring out where she wants to travel to after events. So she meets that value of adventure. And then she's like, thank God I did so well, because now I earn this amount of money. I can pour it into going to this place and enjoying this place for longer than I would if I had to go and do another job or whatever. So it's about that balance as well, the harmony that you need to support yourself. So yeah, they're really good at dealing with tough stuff and learning from it as an important
The people
thing.
you've worked with, talking about reward then and the financial gain, how much of their motivation is external rather than just the intrinsic of, what I trained for this, I wanted to win and I did? Or is it the gold medal? Is it the accolades? Is it the money they get that drives them on? Or again, is that super unique person to person?
It is unique person to person. There is a few younger athletes I've come across who it is about the external, the extrinsic, probably because of the way that social media has made that kind of happen. They brought up in that world, so they want the accolades, they want the star in the lights thing.
Is that okay, or can that only get you so far?
Yeah, it can be a double-edged sword, like everything actually can be a double-edged sword, where now, your identity gets locked in with your results, and that's a real mess, because now you find it challenging to go on stage or whatever you do, because if you don't win, then who are you, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it can be a real, be careful of that. But then if you have a very clear process and you stick to that, the results move to the background, the process moves to the foreground. And that's a huge thing I work with those types of people. I go, okay, cool, you want the star and the shining lights and it's me, and no worries. Just to understand that if that gets too much in the foreground, you're not probably going to last, because you can't control 15 other people on the field, as an example, or 11 or 10 or whatever. So then let's really work on process that allows you to get really connected to what's enjoyable around your process, so that type of mindset or that type of thought pattern moves to the background. And then they work quite well, because it's still a driver. And that's what gets people across the line, is what's it for? The drive. I need to do it because.
I feel like we see that happen in business quite a lot. Like even us on a very, very different level. Like we did not start Harwell Consulting to have an agency of 7 or 8 people within 18 months and, looking to grow further. But I think it's that tapping into the love and why we do it at the early stage, kind of then bred for that growth.
Yeah. And what we're talking about here is moments. There's just little moments through a day or a week where you feel the why. It's not like you have to have it pinned on your forehead. It's just gently there, coming through conversation that you guys might say with the group. Remember, this is why we do this. And an example might be shared or whatever. But so it's so much about, when it comes to performance and high performance under pressure and what we're talking about in terms of values and so on, it's about, don't forget that when you follow the process and the tasks you've got to do well, you'll get the outcome. But don't get so stuck in the internal that you forget about doing the external. You're getting all wrapped up about whys, where just go and send that email or whatever you got to do.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an important piece.
So we work so hard, we follow our process, we give it absolutely everything, and then we get pipped to the post at the hurdle, right? Someone's 1 second quick and we failed. How do people you work with, and how do you help them get over that absolute end of the world feeling of failure sometimes?
Well, one of the things is pipped at the hurdle, it's not in your control. So we need to go in through the journey as that of something in mind, like the client that chooses between you and someone else. Yes, you can influence it, but you can't control it. But if you think about that right from the start and all the way through, just do the best you can, then that's the important part. Did we do our best? Did we, really, yes, we did. Or no, we didn't. Okay, well, next time we need to do this and learn from what you just said, the failure. So that's a setback. Now, give yourself a bit of time to mourn. So when you have challenges like that, like you just said, sometimes you just need to have a bit of a, wow, I'm feeling terrible. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to let the emotion do its thing, because otherwise, if you suppress, avoid, deny, it'll only trip you up down the track. Emotions need to be expressed. You don't have to go and, beat down a wall or something, but you just need to talk about, how do we feel? And you go, I'm feeling so disappointed. Not I am disappointed, because you're not. I'm feeling so disappointed. Name it, you tame it. Then let that happen for maybe 24 hours. Like, give it time. And then you will find that as that dissipates, the emotion, the drive will go, right, what are we going to do now? Because I want to win. And then you come back. But then again, you've got to have principles that guide the way. It's like a lamppost that guides you at night. Like, there's the light, go that way. The principles are, you can't control everything. So know what you can control. Stick to your process, stick to your values. Make sure that, it's not perfect. It's about being maybe a little bit better, because better beats perfect every day of the week. And then what you'll find on the journey of that is you'll get wins. But the principle needs to be right at the end, a lot you won't.
Yeah. And it's so important to let those things go. And I think back to early days when it was me and Adam just working in his spare room, when we just launched the company, and the stakes were all of a sudden so much higher. And that was, with so much on the line, it was difficult for us to deal with. And he actually came up with a genius idea. It was like, did you do absolutely everything you could? If the answer was yes, it was just pack it away and move on. If the answer was no, okay, we know not to make that mistake again. And we put that as an area of highlight into our process for the next time. And then we move on and we repeat that process. And I've probably never told him this, but for me, it created a bulletproof mindset of like, okay, I never lose, because we either get the outcome we want and the process is great, or I've just learned something that's going to make my next process 1% better. And you do that so many times, you can't lose. Yeah.
And pressure, and the pressures that you went through is you've probably heard the notion, pressure is a privilege. A lot of people come up and go, what the hell does that mean? What do you mean a privilege? Well, what it does is it reveals who you truly are and what you need to do to support a better outcome the next time pressure happens. And pressure then is a privilege, because it puts an amount of stress on you that you start to understand more about yourself. What a privilege to learn about yourself based on something external that you're trying to achieve.
We love it, don't we? Like there's some times when something goes wrong, a client goes under or whatever, they owe us money, and it's like, right, backs against the wall. We love it. Obviously, from the sporting background, I'm a goalkeeper, so it is often that last line of defense, high pressure, and we're just like, come on, mate, dig in and let's fight our way out of this.
And this is where principles come into play. Values are great. Principles are also important. One principle I live by is that there's three things you can't avoid. Pain. You can't avoid it. Whether that's emotional or physical. You can't. So when it happens, accept it, and then it's less painful. 2, hard work. You can't avoid hard work if you want to achieve good things. It's just not possible. 3, uncertainty. You can't avoid uncertainty. So those 3 principles I always think about when I have them hit me hard, like, oh, this is painful. Oh yeah, but this is
that's what I signed up for.
So then that acceptance is such a huge part of working through pressure and stress and setbacks and losses or whatever. Acceptance is the first step. Resistance, the more you resist, the more things persist.
One of my personal values, definitely one of the hardwire values, is that ownership and accountability. Absolutely everything is your fault, positive or negative, and the action you took to get the result. It's not something we've spoken about so far with, I guess, the athletes, but do you find then naturally own every action, or are actually some of them in that blame culture where it might be Nam's fault because he didn't train me properly, it might be the coach's fault? And is there key traits of the anti-Joshua of the world compared to your
Yeah.
B grade, if that's the right.
Yeah. And I think, we're all human, so we all have emotions and feelings, and sometimes people will say, "Oh, it's not my fault," or they'll blame something, which is totally normal. That's what people just generally do. They're trying to escape the pain. The ones that really work on responsibility are the ones that go, so where could I have improved there? And taking that ownership. That's radical for a lot of people to work on. You got to work on that, because then you build yourself greater bandwidth when it comes to difficult times, because if it's your responsibility, you'll probably do the best of your ability to not lose, or whatever we're talking about here. So therefore, you would then look back and go, you know what? I still did my best. And that then changes the experience, because you took responsibility. So you would have worked towards your best. But yes, there are athletes that, go bananas sometimes. And that's just letting off steam a lot of the time. They're just not maybe mature enough yet to have the insights of how they should behave when things go south.
I feel like I've learned so much here this last hour. It's incredible. I think although you do work with some of the most incredible athletes in the world, I think there's so many lessons and core principles that we just discussed that anyone can implement into their life and at least take that step to being a better person or getting more out of themselves.
Yeah, it's been a privilege, boys, being here. And I have to say, I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, us too. Took a bit of time to get the time in the diary. Obviously, you're a busy guy for very good reason, as everyone listening would have just found out for the last hour. But exactly what Harv said. I think I sat here, I've just been going, okay, into business, into recruitment, into my life.
Yeah.
There's so much, so many areas to improve, right? Which actually excites me, because I can say, great, I can implement A, B, and C, and then bang, performance is improved.
Yeah.
So I'm stoked to say goodbye now and get straight back on the phone and start calling clients.
Yeah.
But seriously, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for the level of detail you've gone into. I think just listen to you speak. I think I kind of sat there with big puppy dog eyes on. You're such a good talker, and I guess the emotion you get through your words as well. That's what I definitely found when we first heard you on stage. It's definitely a special skill you've developed and you've got in the locker.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah.